Thanks very much for joining us here in person at EXPO Real. This is part of a series that we're running live at Expo from the International Investors Lounge. Thank you to everybody who's joining online. Fantastic panel we've got here to look at sustainable logistics investment. And we're going to pick that up looking at, I guess, what's happening in terms of the sustainability trends broadly, and be able to drill down also into some of the detail of that. We're going to start, first of all, with a couple of presentations. The first one from Sally Bruer at Cushman and Wakefield, and the second one from René at BCI Global, just to look at some of the trends in the investment markets and also some of the trends in the occupier markets, and then we'll use that as, I guess, some fuel for the fire for the discussion. I'm very interested also in your views, so please do bring those into the conversation. But let's welcome Sally. Join me here, Sally. Great.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Obviously, sustainability has become an important part of the equation when we're talking about investment, but we've recently conducted some research to look across the spectrum of sustainability in logistics and industrial to understand what impact different elements are having, particularly on the investment side. But looking at things like occupier strategies, in developer initiatives, asset management strategies, and of course the capital market dynamics. And what I wanted to share in particular today was some of our analysis on investment and pricing, as well as asset management strategies that make a difference to value and performance. Investors are now placing an extraordinary value on sustainability certification, and in our conversations with investors, it's often the top of the list when it comes to the questions around the opportunity beyond just the asset fundamentals and lease structures, etc. So how does sustainability impact the ability to trade, the ability to capture performance for value, and crucially, what does that mean for the future when we're talking about these types of assets? So I wanted to talk firstly around pricing. One of the, have I pressed the wrong button?
No, that big green button should move it forward. Or the lovely Pablo will move it forward. Here we go. Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. So firstly, I wanted to talk a little bit about some proprietary analysis we've conducted looking at sustainable pricing and sustainability, the differential for pricing in logistics and industrial assets. So we've analysed a sample of over 1,500 transactions representing over 1,800 real estate assets over the 5-year period, 2019 to 2023. And we've classified the assets into 2 categories, looking at high-rated assets, those with BREEAM ratings of very good, excellent, and outstanding, and then low or no-rated assets, so everything below that or without a rating in BREEAM terms. And what we've found is the next one for me, Pablo. One more. So what we've found is that over the 5-year period, we've observed an average pricing premium for higher rated assets of 19%. That's on average over the 5-year period. It's moved from as little as 7% out to 31%, but in the last couple of years has settled at around 22-24%. And what we've also found is that when we take out super prime assets in our sample, looking at locations which are value is intrinsically linked to location, that pricing premium goes up to 24% on average, so without the super prime. So it shows that investors are placing a significant value on the quality of the sustainability credentials of assets, and even more so outside those locations where the value is intrinsically linked to the location. What we've also found is that the performance of these assets, if you could move one for me, the performance of these assets is also intrinsically linked to the quality of the assets, and particularly around sustainability. And we believe that these assets are more likely to secure tenants, and the pricing premium is predicated on this performance expectation that they're more likely to secure tenants now and in the future and minimize void. They're more likely to command higher rental levels, and at a pricing premium level for rents, talking to our market experts across Europe, on average, the pricing premium for rental differential between high quality assets and poorer quality assets, so second-hand standing assets in the same markets, we're looking at a differential of between 10 and 30% on rental level. And of course, that means that we're more likely to be able to maintain asset value. And similarly, we need to think about the way in which these assets are able to be traded. So how things are changing with the energy performance of building directives and minimum energy performance standards is going to make a difference to the ability to be able to transact these assets. And not least because of the EU taxonomy system, which is going to make a big difference to transparency of funds and not just the assets, but the funds themselves, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on. I wanted to talk just a little bit about some of the asset management strategies that we've been looking at through our research as well and with our colleagues. One of the challenges is that the majority of our assets in the built environment are standing assets. So we need to think about what the opportunity is to improve these assets as we're holding them in portfolios. We built a portfolio of hypothetical assets, over 90 of them across Europe, 100,000 square meters, 20 years old. And we applied the most common improvements that you would invest in for sustainability and looked to see what the impact of the investment in these improvements would be. And what we found, to stay on the CREM pathway scenario for the 1.5 degree scenario, to remain viable and tradable assets to the 2050. And what we found is that for every 10 euros invested per square meter, we achieve a 2.2 kilogram carbon reduction per annum on average. And that translates to, based on the average cost of energy saving, a 7.5-year payback period for each asset on average. And the things that make the most difference is also really important to know when you're thinking about the opportunity with the assets, what you can do, what is it now, what can you transform it into. The chart on the far left here shows the applications that the investments that we put into each of these assets, and the range in blue, and then the average of what difference it made to the carbon reduction. The most impactful in terms of carbon reduction was the installation of solar PV. At about 57% of the carbon reduction of the assets. However, what solar PV does, and I'm sure Joost will have lots to talk about when we're talking about solar PV, what it does is it improves the quality of the energy that we're using within the building, and so therefore reduces the carbon emissions that way. The other improvements to the assets actually improve the energy use intensity of the buildings and improve the energy efficiency. So actually fundamentally changing the amount of energy that's required to operate these buildings. And then finally, it's important to understand what do occupiers actually want done to their buildings when it comes to the buildings they're using when it comes to sustainability improvements. And on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side of this chart, left-hand side, if you're looking at it on this chart, we've recently conducted surveys of tenants in buildings that we're managing on behalf of investor clients. And 37% of respondents said that they wanted to see solar PV fitted as the way of improving the sustainability of the assets that they're occupying. And another 9% said that they would like to see solar energy battery storage on site, with a range of other energy efficiency improvements as well. And of course, crucial to all of this and enacting effective transformation of existing assets is landlords and occupiers working together. And in those same surveys, we asked occupiers, how willing would you be to work with your landlord to affect this transformation? And overwhelmingly, 2/3 of them said that they would be willing to do that. So it's an opportunity to capture that participation, capture that collaboration, and really transform these assets that we all rely on for value and for performance. So I'm going to hand over to René. Thank you.
Yeah, great, Steady.
Very good. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Sally, for that great presentation. That was focusing on sustainability. And if we talk about ESG, obviously sustainability covers the E from environment. Now, at the Expo, we have a lot of discussion on ESG, but nearly nobody focuses on what the S would mean from social. So let's dig a little bit into that as well. And S is typically that people say, yeah, but talent is very important, whether you run an office or a manufacturing plant or a distribution center. Talent-related factor, whether it's on the cost side or the quality side. Quality means availability of certain skills or visa or housing for labor migrants, etc. Everybody knows that on the importance of talent-related factors, location factors for companies is increasing. But that is not what the S in ESG means. The S in ESG means that, like we have on sustainability, we will get in the future directives, regulations, even laws, which also gives you a better understanding of what the S would really mean. So it's not like, hey, we do a lot for our warehouse workers with more lighting and larger washing rooms and a better cafeteria. It's really also that as a tenant, you have to prove that you comply with new regulations. So I'm not talking for the next couple of minutes about the S from a developer or investor point of view, but what are the concerns and the headaches the tenants, the occupiers in your warehouses are looking for? And then we see that that S is becoming more and more important. And let's not forget, 5 or 10 years ago, we didn't talk about the E of ESG. And look now, we have directives, we have software models, we have great studies like Sally just presented. And our expectation is that that will also be on the S side. So from a tenant perspective, global companies have a value chain, have a global value chain, and in that global value chain, there is somewhere a warehouse, right? So if you look from the global value chain, you have procurement, you have manufacturing, and you have distribution. And then you have the E, the S, and the G. And so on the S, your tenants, the tenants in distribution centers and warehouses, more and more have to comply with international law. You have to prove in the future, it's now already in the German Supply Chain Act, you have to prove in the future that the tenants in your warehouses have to prove that they don't use products made by children. The tenants in your buildings have in the future to prove that your products are not made by the Uyghurs in the western part of China. You have to prove that as a tenant. The tenant has in the future to prove that they have good connections with the community. The tenants in the future have to prove on paper in an annual report, like we have it now also on sustainability, the CSRD reporting, will also have to prove that you have good connections with the unions. So that S, and this is the final slide, shows that as a tenant, in the future, it's not only about sustainability across the whole value chain, and our distribution centers and warehouses are only part of that, but you have to prove how you deal with employees. That's the first stakeholder, you could say. So that you have that they have the opportunity to train, that you pay a decent salary. And again, it started like 5 years ago with ESG. Then it was more like, hey, let's save the planet and let's focus on E. And now we have a large number of regulations, directives. So employees, you have to prove that you have good relationships there. It's also about customers, so that you can prove to your customers how your whole supply chain, and again, I'm talking from the tenant perspective, in your distribution center and warehouses, how that works. It's also on the suppliers, and that's very difficult because you have to prove as a tenant in the future, if you have whatever product in your warehouses, the tenant has to prove that their suppliers are also complying to international regulations on forced labor, on child labor, on the way how employees are represented by unions, etc. And the fourth stakeholder is the community. So also how you deal with the community, that's obviously also what from a developer and investor point of view is already the case. So my message is that we talk rightly a lot about sustainability and environment. There is still a world to conquer in logistics real estate. My expectation is that the headache and the concerns of the tenants and occupiers of distribution centers in the future will be more on the S side than on the E side. With that, I give the mic And a quick back to you. Thank you.
René, thank you.
Thank you, René.
I think some really important things there. And just to be able to see what is
Do
beginning
you
to
see it?
happen and what we might
I
be
don't see
looking at.
anything, but anyway.
And I think, can we make these slides available to people afterwards?
Yes, yes, of course. Yes.
Excellent. So, because I know you couldn't see them. Ingo, so.
I've read them before already.
Good. Let's. Really interesting to see that greater focus on the S and also where we are on the G. Let's do some quick introductions. So, René, let's just start with you. We'll work our way down. Just briefly, who you are, what do you do?
My name is René Beck. I'm a founder and CEO of BCI Global, a worldwide operating location advisory firm, also working for logistics, real estate developers and investors. Our main focus is working for companies to find the right locations, whether it's in Europe, in North America or in Asia.
Great. Sally.
I'm Sally Bruer. I'm at Cushman and Wakefield, and I lead the EMEA Logistics and Industrial Research capacity, working with both my research colleagues across Europe, but also our market-facing colleagues in brokerage, capital markets, and across our service lines.
Super. Joost.
Joost Leendertse, founder of VerusSol, and we're empowering your green strategy, especially for the big logistic companies.
Great. Ingo.
Thank you very much, Richard. My name is Ingo. I'm managing partner for Swiss Life Asset Manager Logistics, and we're building at the moment maybe the most sustainable logistics platform ever in Europe. You see that on the front page here, European Logistics Trends, that is our product. No? We are still the existing Logix Award winner here in Germany, won the race against, I think, 25 global platforms with the first product we produced. That is solar panel on the roof, that is geothermic, where we get the energy, and that is floor heating. And that is quite exciting that we are now in that game as well.
Great, and you can also read more about it. It's not just a poster on the side of these, it's actually in the magazine on the back, so do take a copy of that and you can read about it.
Right.
That's just because it'll be more difficult to read about.
Yes.
Let's pick up a little bit with how we've seen changes, and obviously what we've got here is we've got the advisory side on the investment side, we've got the advisory side and the research side also on the occupier side, we've got the investment side, and then we've also got a specialist on sustainability in terms of solar and PVs on roofs. My sense is that there's been actually quite a significant amount of change over the past 12 months, but I'd be interested to get your perspectives on how that's changed for you. Let's start with you, Joost.
It's changed significantly because what we saw before, the other models like rooftop lease, utility models, are now not anymore. The owner of the asset managers understand that you need to do it right. You need ownership and control for the E-part, and you have to engage with your tenant. You have to do it together, and that is, I think, a big step in understanding that is now changing. Yeah.
Right. Okay, good. And if we look at, and again, this is for anybody. If we look at, let's start, I guess, with the E part of this. And how does sustainability fit into the overall logistics chain? Particularly if you're an operator, how important is this real estate component? We're spending a lot of time worrying about it. Are they?
Well, perhaps I can chip in. It's a really important question for the occupiers, particularly when they're setting their strategies around carbon reduction, emissions reduction, and their own sustainability goals. The WEF estimates that for the global freight transport industry, real estate accounts for around 13% of emissions. The rest of it is transport. So what that implies, and of that 87%, about 56% of it is road. So what it implies is that whilst your asset is really important, and we as the built environment specialists need to do everything we can to optimize the performance of the assets, when it comes to the logistics and supply chain industry, location is critical. Because by being able to optimize your location, you're able to then better improve your emissions on your transport side, which is the bulk of where your emissions are. And we've done some supply chain modeling as part of our research and looking at what the massive impact that optimizing your location could make. It's not to diminish the importance of ensuring that the assets, the real assets that we're dealing with, are as good as they possibly can be, are improved to the point where they know that the asset, that part is fine. They can then focus largely on how they can improve through the other parts of their supply chain.
And René, maybe picking up with you from that occupier side, what are you seeing there? And also, do you get a sense that, I mean, there's a view that tenants will pay more for this? What's your view on that?
Yeah, it was actually also a question I wanted to pose to Sally, because in her presentation she said 2 out of 3 respondents on the occupier said, we are willing to discuss with our landlord. Okay, that's willing to discuss, that's already something. The question is actually, are they willing to pay for that? Our researchers show that, I would say, up to 5% additional lease for a really ESG compliant building. That's something where you can discuss with. But it's hard discussions, because also in this market, occupiers take the view, hey, we read everywhere that the logistics real estate market is down, so why do we have to pay anyway? So I would say up to 5%, that's a reasonable discussion. And we see that our tenants our clients are prepared to pay for that. Above that, it becomes more difficult. Ingo?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for our daily business as a developer, for example, you need a toolbox to convince one stakeholder, which has been missed, I think, in the presentation so far. That's the municipality, the society. What kind of product you are delivering? Is it really sustainable? Do we have solar panels on the roof? It's quite easy to recommend, but to do it, then it's the next step. For example, we have in Düsseldorf one asset that is a solar panel, and we have 11,000 households who can get energy from that. So if you would like to get a building permit from the municipality, from the state of Düsseldorf, it's easier. For us, it's in our DNA. Everybody understands what it's needed, and then you get the permission, and then you can get speed to the process. Because in delivering boxes to our customer base, it's always the question to be answered: when can we get operating in it, and how are we operating in it? Is it cheaper to operate than our competitors? That is the most. It's a competitive advantage to have sustainability in your toolbox as a developer, for sure.
And do you get a sense, though, that it's a competitive advantage at the moment, but actually everybody is going to have to ultimately do that, so that you will then need to drive forward even further with standards in order to keep ahead of the market?
Yeah, I think when I started the business 25 years ago, I was a developer for one of the biggest retailer in the world. And we have a budget of 100,000 euros for sustainable aspects. Now, being with Swiss Life, 165 years in the business, very sustainable as a Switzerland investment company, we have 15% of our whole development appraisal is about sustainability. If you are opening our investment papers, there are 10 pages about what are the commercials, 20 pages about how sustainable you are. Completely changing the world, completely in this aspect.
But we also see at the moment that around, if we calculate the sweet spot, because there's for a tenant or the occupier, also marketing value, capability to be to their clients again. So we see that their willingness around 3-4 euro to pay extra per square meter is, because also the lower operating cost, but not much more.
So this is linked into the power that if the investor, the owner, is therefore providing power to the occupier, that they are happier to pay.
There is a boundary for them, and the boundary is gewoon the electricity price. They never go higher than the electricity price, and also a little bit convenient. So it should be always half as low the normal electricity price. Then you can do it. But the real value of sustainability is not in an IRR. The real thing is I think, on the end, the G of good governance. You are a building owner and you should do it right, like you did in Düsseldorf or this building. It costs extra, but on the end, on the long term, you will deliver the society and the environment a much better building. So the payment is somewhere else, and that is what we try to explain.
Yeah, for some aspects you're absolutely right, but at the end it's still the underlying asset is a commercial one. No?
Of
we need
course,
to
but
look
it
at
cannot
this. No? The tenant needs to look at it, but Sally, you mentioned it in your presentation, 7 years of payback periods of something we are doing there. No? And for example, big drivers of demand at the moment in European logistic clusters are the battery, the recycling business. No? So the future is that your truck fleet is with electricity, no? Not again with gas or something like that. No? So you need to prepare your powerhouse, no? That the fleet can charge, no? At the warehouse. No? That makes sense. No?
And, absolutely, and I think occupiers are never not going to be focused on cost. They're always going to be commercially minded about what it costs. But what the cost looks like in the future, as well as now, especially when we're thinking about what the asset needs to do for them over the term of the lease or the term of their anticipated occupation, the better the building is, the more operationally efficient, arguably, for the most part, you're more able to achieve a more efficient operation in a better quality building, and you're more likely to be able to reduce your overall cost within that asset than you would be in a poorer quality building. Full stop.
Yes.
But when you then add in the cost advantages, both financial but also social and the intangible value that the sustainability improvements to real estate make, it all goes into the future expectations. And of course, the cost doesn't just happen now. It's the transparency of your cost as an occupier going forward. And also the risk that if you are not, if you're an occupier and you have a corporate ethos around sustainability and you're not seen to do that in your assets, you're putting yourself at risk of losing customers, losing revenues. So there are lots of different risks and cost factors to consider.
But then the question is, if the value of the building, a sustainable building, is so much higher, that would be, for me, the perfect reason for not passing on the bill to the tenant. Because if you say, well, hey, the building is going to, with a sustainable building, it has a higher value, that means that the asset of Ingo will increase in value. So why should then the tenant occupier pay a higher lease fee if at the end of the day the sustainability pays back?
It helps.
Just to open up the discussion, Ingo.
Sure, we can discuss everything. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, at the end, you need is a balance in between.
It's
I think
a skill.
Yeah. And it's the value of retention of the tenant, the lack of void. There are lots of different value points, right?
I just maybe one of my in my career, when we were sold from Walmart to Dubai World, we had a Blue Planet project in UK. You may have heard about it, no? You may have seen Teletubbies.
Yeah.
The green ones are jumping into the hills, something like that. That was the warehouse we are developing at that time, no? Directly into the financial crisis. No? So we were not able to find any occupier for 2 or 3 years, and the rental level, no? It was 1/3 of what has been underwritten, no? Because we have over-exceeded, no? With being green. No? So it needs always to be a balance in between, no? What needs to be done. There's for sure some budget from the investors to be sustainable, because coming to green financing, bringing it in regulated structures, no? It's always a look into it, in what have you done, no? And being really scalable is like we have an investment paper and 10 about commercials and 20 pages about being green. You can copy paste that, no, to green financing, as you say, everything is clear, and you get really 20 basis points, 30 basis points better. No? So it's an overall aspect of this has to be seen. No? At the end, this is a great deal for everybody, no? For the occupier, for the investors, for the municipality. It needs to be.
And let's be honest, there is also a responsibility and a duty from the tenant occupier's perspective.
Yes,
but
yes,
it's more
yes.
in the negotiation, in the financial discussions. it's often tougher than the the CEO objectives in the annual report say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just on that occupier side, that discussion about power, but also is that from the occupier side about downsizing the risk, if you like, because of surges in power, or even availability of power?
I think.
What's the driver?
I think for them is, for example, if you deliver to Amazon, you have to maintain the nature pledge. So when you're an occupier and you're not in a green building and decarbonizing your value chain, you cannot deliver anymore to Amazon. So you're going to lose a certain type of clients. So that's for occupiers an important thing.
I know, for example, another example of a medical devices company who delivers medical products to hospitals. The hospitals are requiring that you have completely decarbonized supply chains. So our client who's producing the medic has now to go back to 26 transportation companies in Europe to find out what are the driver licenses, what kind of truck is being used, what are the distances, can you not reduce that, etc. Because it's one of the requirements of the hospitals to get that contract. So if you have not organized that well, you can even not supply your medical device, even if it's a fantastic instrument.
Yeah, and this is all new, and it's coming more and more, and especially when the S is stepping in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that focuses on the S is important. I just wanted to pick up a little bit on the E part of it in terms of, I guess, new development, differences between big box, urban, but also the differences between that and redevelopment or retrofitting. How practical is it? What can you do? So if there are people who are looking at this wondering what should they do next in terms of their assets, what would the advice be? I mean, it would be interesting to get your sense of that, and also if anybody else has to be on the retrofitting side.
Yeah, I think it's when you are a developer and you have a new logistics development pipeline, I can only recommend that your specs are clear from the beginning, no? Because anything else, no? If you don't have the capacity on the roof, for example, for solar panels, no? It costs you so much money, no, to get it done, no? The solar panel readiness, no? And honestly, it costs you 20 euros per GLA, no? If you are solar panel ready. No? So no? You need to have the flight to quality, no? Needs to be done. No? In refurbishment, there's always a technical check what you can be done. No?
I mean, I think in refurbishment and retrofitting, it's sort of three critical questions. What is your asset now? And a lot of people with large portfolios, you need to dig into what individual assets represent. What can it be? And getting good advisory about what that asset transformation could be, because it may not be what you expect it could be.
Yes.
It may be more than you expect it could be. But you also need to know how you achieve that. And then the last thing is to say, well, what's the risk if you don't do enough or you do nothing? So is that asset going to be one that you really can't do anything to, and you're prepared to trade it out, flatten it, rebuild, do something?
Yeah.
But it's that critical path of questioning, and then that middle part of understanding what the transformation can be, and then how you achieve it at the right cost, for the right uplift in value, the right proposition to the market, so what the occupiers want, and then how you achieve that is the most powerful thing that you can be asking yourself about. The majority of the assets in our market are existing assets. We have to do something about them, but it's doing the right thing.
But on a practical level, Joost, obviously there's a big focus on new development, solar on roofs. From a practical level, is it the same in terms of retrofitting? Are there issues with roof strength, those kinds of elements?
Kijk, what the problem mostly is what we see, especially by technical due diligence, is the quality. So we came out of a market full of cowboys. Sorry to say it wrongly, but mostly of the roofs, and we think around 90% is not good. And therefore the regulations of fire and weight is absolutely not on the good page to do retrofitting. So we hope that in the coming year we see a lot of new involvement in the inverters and the new type of PV panels. So they are lighter, and we hope that all the insurance companies are going to join and to together a new uitgangspunt, hoe zeg je dat?
Starting point.
A starting point or a letter to make it more clear, because it's so adequate.
Varied?
Various, that there is no point of view in it. And that's the two major difficult things. And for all the rest, there is a solution.
So that's where regulation needs to start playing its role in helping drive that forward if we want to achieve actual results on it. And what you're also mentioning there is, I guess, innovation in terms of solar panels, the technology beginning to advance and change. Do we see that as a big element of the solution? Obviously, Ingo, as well, you're looking at adding innovations into new developments as they come up. How effective is that, and what are the challenges around it?
Yeah, I think basically, if you look at our development appraisal, for the environmental stuff, solar panel installation can be done quite easily. If you have any development appraisal, 20 euros as a budget per GLA, then this can be done.
And then you mean construction?
And construction.
Yeah.
Challenging is a little bit the asset management of solar panel installation. When we are not in UK, we have maybe tough winters with snow on the roof, for example. And who's taking care of it? Is it the solar installation company? Is it us? Is it the occupier? And what's happening if they cannot charge the energy into the solar panels, for example? Yeah, geothermic, what we have done here in our award-winning logistic assets, you need to find the ground where you put into your piles. It doesn't need to be 150, 200 meters, because then it's too costly, to be honest. And floor heating, it depends on the business you have in it. It's control, temperature control, and anything else. So to standardize, and that is coming back to you, what is the catalog? What needs really to be done that you have really a future-proofed logistics warehouse in the future? That are the challenge. And always the commercial aspects again and again, because we do not have the time 2-3 years ago when we are on the peak on occupier demand. It's a little bit softer in these days. So you cannot ask for 10 euros per square meters when the occupier do not have the business for it. That is always, you need to look at it. But I think you are in a very golden time as a developer, because the building costs at all, we do not have seen any inflation for quarters now. It comes down again. We have yield compression, a little bit softer of occupier market, but the investment market is still doing quite well. Not that well like 2-3 years ago, but we are waiting on core investors coming back, and then everything is again perfect. We're only some steps away from it, yes.
I would like to add that from a developer and investment point of view, we're talking about sustainable investment than in the building.
Yes.
But I would also draw the attention to the site itself. So if you are on a brownfield site, that's sustainable in itself as well. So you don't have to open up new greenfield locations. We have done a study in a number of cases to analyze the existing situation, the previous situation and the new situation. So you see a massive increase of intensity of space, you see more labor there, you have more sustainable buildings at the same site as the previous older buildings, asbestos is being removed. So I think and I see that in various countries, the attention for brownfield investments is also is sustainable in itself also. So not only the building, but also the site. And for developers, advantages are that these locations often have already zoning plans, and there is in many cases already electricity, which in some locations is a problem. So sustainability in real estate has two levels. It has the level of the asset itself, but also the location can be more sustainable than others.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. I've got one quick question which I'd like to just pick up on related to the S, and we could have a whole session on the S, interestingly, from the points that...
we will do that the next 5 years here at EXPO.
But that focus where you mentioned that the occupiers were going to have to be looking at all the way through their supply chain and who they were working with. On the counter side of that, does that mean that the investors will also have to look at who they have as occupiers inside their buildings?
It's an interesting question. Will the investors in the future be selective on companies who comply with the social regulations? I give an example, let's say from the Netherlands. We have a lot of migrant workers from all countries working in warehouses. The question is, who's responsible for the housing of those workers? So in the Netherlands we have people from Poland, Ukraine, Romania, etc. And there is now a certificate you can get as a temp agency that you treat your migrant workers well. So here is another question. Would you as an investor say, I only want to have tenants of which we know that they use a lot of temp agencies for the temporary workers, who have that certificate that they guarantee that the migrant workers they hire are treated well. And so the role of the investor, and you talked about commercial versus other elements, this will be an interesting question as well. Would you say, well, I only want to have socially responsible tenant occupiers in my buildings?
Interesting. We're pretty much out of time, so I just want to have
Oh,
one. Well, I know it's gone so quickly. And so, what would be interesting, I think, would be to get from everybody what they would like to see. So, what would all of you like to see as either have moved forward, or what do you think are the key things for you that you would like to see moved forward, or for the industry to embracing in 12 months' time? René, let's start with you, and we'll finish with
Ingo.
Ingo.
Yes.
Okay. I would hope that the industry uses more consultants than BCI Global. That's my vision forward. But a more serious, I think from a real estate perspective, we have to understand that all what we have on ESG regulations is adding a lot of concerns and headaches to companies, to tenant occupiers on what to do, because their basic business is to distribute product or store products in a warehouse in an efficient manner. So I think the important is for developers and investors to understand what are the concerns and challenges from their tenant and occupiers. And I think if you do that well as an investor, you can gain a competitive advantage by understanding your clients better.
Okay, great. Sally?
I'd go back to the asset management strategies that landlords and owners of assets, occupiers included, need to really think about. So understanding what your assets are, what they could be, and how to do that, and thinking about it not just altruistically, but from a real asset performance, asset value, avoidance, income retention. All of those good things that we want in the investment community also go with the betterment of the assets from a sustainable, environmentally sustainable perspective.
Okay, great, Joost.
No, I'm totally agree with René. Please leave the decarbonization of your assets to the specialist. Understand, think differently. There is no IRR on ESG. It's somewhere else. It's in the lifespan, and it's everywhere a little bit. It's not an IRR on selling energy or something else. And please do it, because everybody's the last year, 5 year talking. Could you imagine what we already could be done in the last 5 years? Oh.
I think basically our industry is the flight to quality even stronger than before the crisis.
Yeah.
The flight to quality means that we have a high quality product that has the acceptance of any stakeholders. And if you have a high quality product, you are targeting the industry, like the Procter & Gamble's, like the Siemens and everything else. And we are quite sure, René, that they're taking care about the aspects you are mentioning. That is absolutely, we are checking that, and think everybody should do that. And I'm quite optimistic that we are in the right business, no?
I
Because
thought that you would agree with the fact that more people should use consultants like us, but you agree with the second part of my remark.
I agree with you. No? So, what could we do more? Yes.
Really interesting discussion. And Ingo, I would like to congratulate you not only on the building there, but also I think I must have done something like 600 or 700 sessions like this. And it's the first time anyone has ever mentioned Teletubbies. Who's watched a lot of Teletubbies? What a marvellous thing! Let me say, we should do more of it. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, I'm in deep of my heart. I'm a developer. You only need to present a story. No? That's what about.
Thanks very much to everybody here who's joining us in the room. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to everybody joining us online. And if you're watching this on demand, thank you very much for watching. Thanks, everybody.